Welcome to Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio with author, speaker, and your host, Pat Rouleau. Finally, someone willing and able to blow the top off hidden healthcare and hospital dangers. She's provocative, upbeat, balanced, fearless, fresh. Pat has over 20 years of experience as a professional public speaker and knows how to approach this important subject with enough humor and wit to keep you informed, entertained, and empowered. Each week you will say, "Oh," as Pat explores and exposes little-known hospital hazards, delves into the deep waters of dangerous healthcare practices, picks the brains of her good-looking and influential guests to help keep you and your family stay safe in today's fragmented healthcare system. The program is not intended to replace medical advice from a licensed professional, but rather to encourage you to become a well-informed participant in your health and well-being. And now, your host, Pat Rouleau.
I can't bear again no more, baby. I got too much pride. But I'll survive. Keyboard.
Today, it's Father's Day weekend, a time to reach out to that one of two people responsible for the fact that you are here today. So, no matter where your father is right now, next door, across country, or somewhere in a heavenly location, give a smile, a nod, and a thank you. And I thank your father, too. Because of him, you are joining us today, and that is a good thing. Our guest today is kind of like the father of public transparency, as he was one of the first, if not the first, hospital CEO to publicly blog about his organization's clinical outcomes, such as infections and wrong site surgeries, in real time. And we have a fun and new appropriate game for today called Father Knows Best. So turn off all unnecessary electronic devices, as they say, nothing on but the radio, and enjoy this next short hour with us. But now, it's time for the healthcare hazard of the week. Today's hazard is people. Yep, people are a healthcare hazard. What kind of people? Everyone. Patients, doctors, nurses, family members. We're always so inextricably involved with our own thoughts, biases, processes, procedures, and outdated data that it is sometimes difficult to realize that if we simply simplified, we just might be better off. I had the opportunity to address the Ohio Hospital Association's Partnership for Patients last week at their conference, and the one thing that hit home immediately is that everyone in attendance appeared to be caring, concerned, and committed. After all, why else would folks drive across the state to sit for 10 hours with no food? Because sequestration no longer permits any form of nourishment. Well, to start off the morning, awards were given to hospitals who measurably reduced harm in many of the categories we discuss on this show, such as a reduction in surgical site infections, central line and catheter-associated urinary tract infections, a reduction in pressure ulcers, falls, and so on. I was so impressed to learn that these reductions were accomplished because in those hospitals, the senior leadership was obviously on board, and they somehow managed to align their processes with people. Throughout the day, I heard many busy and important-sounding catchwords and phrases. Everyone strives to reach the benchmark, as identified through a host of different metrics: financial, utilization, cost productivity metrics, clinical performance, patient safety, patient satisfaction metrics. Phew. Then there's the concern for sustainability and the busting down of silos across the healthcare continuum. There are crosswalks and roadmaps. But when you get down to it, it all does begin and end with people. And that's where I'm thinking that we're losing the battle. Perhaps it's not really all that complicated, or maybe I'm just being an oversimplistic bystander. During my presentation, I recounted a story that happened during my mom's most recent hospital stay that highlighted my topic, that being the patient experience. Now, I think it goes without saying that the patient experience first and foremost includes surviving the visit unharmed by untoward medical events, such as mistakes and infections that many of the hospitals at the conference have successfully conquered. So with that as a given, what else goes into the making or breaking of the patient experience? People. So here's what happened. My mom was readmitted for 2 days to have some sternal wires removed from her chest that had poked through the skin after her heart surgery. The morning of the surgery, I waited quietly in her room for her to return. Finally, as the transporter wheeled her into the room, a nurse who preceded him pointed her finger and yelled, "You have to leave." Well, she startled me as I was unprepared for her abruptness. Now, if you know me, I'm a polite person, and I'll give you a few pokes. So I very kindly responded, "Why?" With hands on her hips, she very easily retorted, "Because I asked you to." Whoa, back off, sister. I'm not your child or your poor husband or your dog. So again, I responded politely and with a feigned sadness, "Well, you don't have to be rude to me." And with that, she physically lunged forward towards me, and in her high-pitched voice, she screeched, "Oh, so you think I'm being rude?" Well, had we been in a different setting, I might have taken this gal on, but my mom was laying so sadly on the gurney, and the transporter's jaw was on the ground, shocked by the nurse's performance, I decided that it would be best for my mom if I quietly left the room. The transporter followed me and apologized for this shocking and unacceptable behavior, and he initiated that he was going to follow up on this and report it. Do I really think that anyone is going to even listen or put any credence into a transporter's rendition? No, that guy is on the bottom of the totem pole. So why do I tell you this story? Because you can have the best systems, processes, procedures. You can reach the benchmark set forth by a plethora of metrics, but if one person does not have the ability to communicate with empathy, or who brings their exhaustion, frustration, or anger to the patient's room, then guess what? Nothing else matters. This nurse held the power of being a game changer. She held the key to love and fear and willingly chose to unlock the latter. Bad experience, bad patient satisfaction survey, bad scores, bad for business. So I do think it's people who make the difference, especially when it comes to the patient experience. During my presentation, I also suggested that hospitals and other healthcare-associated organizations, such as nursing homes, hospice, rehab facilities, become centers for learning and teaching, to reach out to the public, to the community, to their audience of potential patients, customers, to redefine patient expectations. I asked the question of the audience, who is responsible for the patient experience? Everyone agreed, pointed to themselves, and said that it was the provider's responsibility to create the patient experience. Well, I think they were somewhat surprised when I agreed, but also suggested that the patient is also responsible for their experience. The patient should not expect to show up totally unaware and incapable of explaining their symptoms, not knowing what medications they take or why, but expecting to lay back and experience a speedy resolution. But then again, maybe healthcare providers like it better this way. No one asks questions. No one challenges a diagnosis. Heck, no one even knows what that silly ask button means. And speaking of the ask button, that typifies what I'm talking about when I suggest that providers reach out to teach patients. What does the ask button mean? What am I supposed to ask you? And more importantly, what happens to me if and when I don't ask? I just read that some hospitals are getting cute with the ask button, and instead the buttons and the signs say, "Got gel?" Wow, that could elicit all kinds of risque questions unsuitable for the asking. But here's a question. Where is the patient supposed to get this knowledge? Who is responsible to teach them? So again, I suggest that the provider reach out to the community to go beyond the ask button, to provide what I call pep talks, patient engagement programs, patient education parties, patient experience programs, whatever you want to call it. Perhaps weekly 1-hour open sessions within the hospital walls that bring in someone like myself, someone not scary, a fellow patient or family member, to talk with potential patients and family members about what to expect during their stay. When do rounds occur so that the patient can be sure that a family member is there? Are there any clothing identifiers to distinguish an RN from an LPN from an aide? And why is that important to know? What does the ask button mean? So why is it important for a doctor, nurse, or family member to wash their hands before they touch you? Expectations are a scary thing because people land on a provider's doorstep with varying degrees of experience, education, and health literacy. It is impossible for any healthcare organization to satisfy this random collection of unattainable expectations. So how about if the provider gives the public an opportunity to know what the expectations should be so they are in alignment with some sort of reality? And I finally suggest that providers reach out to people via proven messaging techniques and avenues such as radio, a medium that actually has the track record of being effective. Go public, air your human interest stories, give your potential customers, the community, the patients and families, give them a clue. What can we do to stay safe when we're under your care? Why? How? And how will you help us? Will you provide an atmosphere that fosters our newfound skills and knowledge? Will all people, from the top down, bottom up, sides in, inside out, have the ability, desire, and empathy to treat all patients and family members at all times with basic human respect that they would expect if they were us? What do we need to know? Tell us. And no, not with a huge billboard that says we are number one. Aren't they all? So let's get real and back to the basics of people working with and helping people. Metrics and benchmarks and studies and data, they're obviously important, but let's not forget the entire point of it all, and that is people. We need each other. We can help each other if we can begin to level the playing field when it comes to knowledge and expectations, and when the atmosphere is such that patients are not afraid to speak. People can be a hazard, or they can be the answer. I'm not an old hippie. Maybe I am. Come on, people. Everybody get together right now.
Come on, people now. Smile on me, brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Right now. Right now.
Let's hear some legal news you can use. When it comes to healthcare safety and just life in general, we can't be expected to be the expert of all things. That's why we need to have resources, people to help us when we enter unknown areas, especially when it comes to legal matters. Here's Allison and Pat. During hospital check-in, we are asked about advance directives. What exactly is an advance directive?
Specifically, they are referring to a healthcare power of attorney and oftentimes also a living will. The healthcare power of attorney is a document in which you can execute naming an agent to make medical decisions for you if you're unable to do that on your own. The living will is a document that states your intention with respect to end-of-life care and your wish to be permitted to die naturally without artificial means to prolong your life.
And a living will is going to take precedence over your health care power of attorney. So a living will declaration stating that you do not wish extraordinary means and measures used to prolong your life in a terminal condition is going to take precedence over your health care agent making a decision that would be different than that. When people begin to plan around healthcare issues, around financial matters, that they need to look at the big picture, to step back and look at their life, look at their relationships, look at their assets, and plan for disability and plan for death. People often plan for death, but not for disability.
It's very important to name people that you trust implicitly. You want to be sure that you trust them now, because when they are going to be acting on your behalf, you're not going to be able to oversee what it is they're doing.
That's excellent advice. And how can our listeners learn more about you and your firm?
Our offices are located in Willoughby Hills, Ohio. We have a website at schraffking.com. We can also be reached at 440-585-1600.
Well, it was a pleasure, Pat and Allison. Thank you for being here today, and I appreciate talking with you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much for having us.
You are listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio. I'm Pat Rouleau, your healthcare and hospital survival guide.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast.
Let's spend the next 2 minutes with our resident cleaning and infection preventionist, Darrell Hicks, nationally recognized as one of the top experts in infection control, as well as author of the book, Infection Prevention for Dummies. Darrell, we know that double dipping a cracker into dip or a chip into salsa can spread bacteria from a person's mouth to the food. Is there a double dipping rule when it comes to cleaning?
There sure is, Pat. One of my pet peeves is to go to a restaurant or a dining facility and see the same bucket and same cloth rag used to wipe tables, wipe seats, and pick up stuff off the floor, and then they put it back in the bucket and use it the next time. All you're doing is overloading the cleaner or the disinfectant that's in that bucket, and when it becomes overloaded with soil, then it no longer is a disinfectant. You might as well just be using water. So our folks are trained to set up their bucket with the water mixed with the disinfectant to put their clean microfiber cloths into the bucket. When they pull a cloth out, they wring out the excess disinfectant, and then they fold the cloth in half and half again, and then that gives them 8 sides to that one cloth. After using those 8 sides, then the cloth never goes back into the bucket. It goes into a soiled laundry bag that then goes to the laundry to be washed and dried. Never double dip into a bucket. Even at home, if you clean a bathroom with one cloth, then you should not use that cloth for other bathrooms or other surfaces in the home. Try to use one cloth per room.
Great advice, Darrell. So no matter whether we're eating or we're cleaning, no double dipping.
No double dipping.
Very good.
How can we learn more about you and your book, Infection Prevention for Dummies?
That would be on my website, DarrellHicks.com.
Thank you, Darrell, for joining us today. We look forward to your weekly guest visits, as you always have so much usable information to share.
Thanks, Pat.
You are listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio. I am your hostess, Pat Rouleau, and as always, we only bring you the best of the best when it comes to our guests. And today, we're going beyond the best. We have Paul Levy with us, perhaps the most well-known and former hospital CEO in the United States. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks, Pat. Great to be with you.
Thank you. It only took us a few months to do this, right?
Right.
Paul, do you mind if I give a little background so our listeners can have a feeling for who you are and where you came from?
Yeah, but if it's too positive, they won't believe it, so be careful.
All right, folks. Paul Levy was president and CEO of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center from 2002 to 2011, the teaching hospital associated with Harvard University. He has held a variety of other leadership positions, including executive dean from administration at Harvard Medical School, executive director of the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, chairman of the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, and director of the Arkansas Department of Energy. Paul is also credited with the Boston Harbor cleanup and with saving the hospital from financial disaster after a failed merger threatened its closure. During his hospital tenure, he also authored a blog titled Running a Hospital and was one of very few hospital CEOs to share publicly via social media the inside issues of the hospital, such as hand washing compliance and infection rates, with the goal of transparency. He's written many articles in a wide variety of genres and is author of 2 books, Goal Play, Leadership Lessons from the Soccer Field, which we will talk about later, and How a Blog Held Off the Most Powerful Union in America. His current blog is called Not Running a Hospital and is one of my favorite online reads. There's so much more to know, but I don't want to spend another second talking when we have this esteemed guest with us today. So, ready to go, Paul?
I am ready, Pat. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. We talked earlier today about hospital-acquired infections, healthcare-associated infections, and I think that's something our listeners are always interested in. Why is it still a problem?
That's one of the great mysteries in the medical world, because we know how to avoid hospital-acquired infections for the most part. I mean, there are some that are inevitable, but many are preventable, whether they're central line infections, whether they're ventilator-associated pneumonia, or urinary tract infections. There are protocols that, if they are followed every time with every patient, we can basically eliminate those kinds of infections. Peter Pronovost from Johns Hopkins did a wonderful piece of work with the hospitals in the state of Michigan, and they knocked out central line infections by training in the use of this protocol and holding themselves accountable. So it's a bit distressing when you hear that some hospitals still haven't done that. Part of how I spend my time now is going around the country and indeed around the world, giving workshops and trying to inspire people to do this stuff right.
And that's a little frustrating for us as patients, because what can we do about that? I know we always want to ask our providers to wash their hands as a reminder, but then as a patient, wow, we find that difficult to do.
I think it's really, really uncomfortable to ask a nurse or a doctor to wash his or her hands as they come in. Although, having talked to many of them, they don't mind if you do that. It's actually the patients feel more uncomfortable than the doctors and the nurses. So when in doubt, if you see a doctor or nurse enter your room and you suspect that they may not have cleaned their hands, it's perfectly okay to say, I don't want to embarrass you in any way, but I didn't notice you cleaning your hands, and they'll do that. So that's one thing. That's perhaps the simplest thing. But on some of these other procedures, like putting in a central line in your chest or your neck, what should you do? What should you ask? And what I've found is, I've talked to a lot of friends about this who've been in the hospital. First of all, as Pat, as you've often said, it's really important to have someone with you to be your advocate in that situation. You're sick, you don't feel well, perhaps you're semi-conscious. It just doesn't feel right to speak up for yourself very often at that point. But someone with you, if let's say a nurse or a doctor is coming in to insert a central line, imagine if that person just said, gee, I've been reading a lot about central lines and the new protocols that everybody's using. Do you do that here? And you just ask the question in that way of the physician or of the nurse. Chances are they know what the protocol should be, and just by asking it, you're more likely to have it done correctly.
So many patients they don't have the education or the skills or the knowledge to even know that. And that's what I'm all about, is to get out and try to educate and inform the patient. How many people want to voluntarily go to a lecture or a class to learn about how to be a safe patient? So how do we get that information to them?
So we can't expect the person on the street, the man or woman on the street, who's going to a hospital, maybe for the first time in their life or maybe the 10th time in their life, to have the technical knowledge that's required to do all these things safely, to know what questions to ask in terms of the specifics. But you can always ask general questions about what's going on. A doctor is coming to do some procedure on you or some test or whatever. It's perfectly fine to say, can you please explain the purpose of this test? You can also say, are there any risks about it, and what do you do to mitigate the risks? So these can be open-ended kinds of questions. The mere fact that you ask them is likely to make the nurse or doctor a little bit more careful and perhaps remind them in their hurried day, and they have a very busy day, we have to expect that there is a protocol that they should be following. So you don't do it in an accusatory way, you do it in a curious way. After all, it's your body, you have every right to ask, gee, doctor, why are we doing this test? Are people ever injured by the test? What do you do to prevent that? And just engage them in a conversation. They will actually enjoy that conversation. They will not feel put upon.
Probably be quite surprised that someone's actually initiating that type of conversation as well.
I think it's highly respectful to do that. Mm-hmm. You're not undermining the authority of the doctor or the nurse. In fact, you're relying on their expertise, and you're expressing curiosity about what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's you or your loved one sitting there makes it all the more interesting to you, obviously, because you're the patient. But they won't take affront at that. And if they do, then I would push a little harder. I'd say, gee, you seem to be getting upset about the question. Why? Right. It's okay to ask that. I promise you, no doctor or nurse will ever treat you worse because you've gotten them upset in their question and by asking questions. If anything, they'll get more cautious. Let's understand that people who become doctors and nurses are among the most well-intentioned people in the world.
Right.
They devote their lives, their whole lives, to taking care of us. They actually want to take good care of us. But there's a lot of stresses in those jobs. They have a lot to do, a lot of patients to see, paperwork and all that stuff. And just as you and I could get stressed out in doing our job, they do too, and sometimes they forget to do certain things. One of the things they'll forget to do, as you and I would in our job, is they forget to communicate. And so our job as the customer, or the patient in this case, or the advocate for the patient, is to ask in a nice way, gee, what's up? What are we doing here? What do we hope to accomplish? Any risks? And they'll engage with you. They really will.
And I always promote the patient really needs to be part of the patient experience. We can't pretend that we're going to Disneyland or a Broadway show and
Exactly.
lay back. And we need to know and be able to verbalize and participate in the
Right.
in the sport.
This is not an amusement park ride. This is a serious part of your life. Anytime you're at a hospital for treatment or observation, there's something either going wrong in your body or potentially going wrong in your body. You have as big a vested interest as anybody in the world, other than your children and your parents, in making sure it goes right. And it's an odd thing that we kind of clam up at that point and don't talk through it. So you take a deep breath and just ask a simple question first. It will get the conversation going, and then that will make you more comfortable about the next question and the next one after that.
Good. That is great advice. Now, you talked about the central line infection. So the patient really, they might be able to ask a question, what's the process, what's the procedure? But what about lapses in sterile processing with instruments?
And those, as a patient, you can't do anything
Right.
about those things. Those are invisible, and you'll never know about it. Or one of the things that I pursued at our hospital when I was at Beth Israel Deaconess, in order to hold ourselves as accountable to the standard of care that we said we believed in for our patients, which was a very high standard of care, was to publish publicly for the world to see how many cases of harm we caused to patients in our hospital. Surgical site infections, falls, pressure ulcers, whatever they were. And every quarter we would actually publish the number of cases of harm that we had caused and the categories and what we were trying to do about that to reduce and eliminate those cases of harm. And as I've gone around the world, I've discovered that the hospitals and nursing homes and other places that are transparent about their performance, about their actual clinical performance, tend to do better because it indicates that they're serious about building into their everyday work whatever processes, procedures, protocols, reviews, or whatever it takes to do a better job to reduce harm to patients. So one of the things you can do for those elective procedures where you might have a choice of where to go, you might want to check the websites of the hospitals, or you might want to call their quality control department and say, I'm trying to decide which hospital to go to for my knee surgery or whatever it is. And what do you folks do about adverse events? Do you report them widely? Do you publish your data on your clinical outcomes? If so, I'd like to see where that's done. Tell me about your quality control programs. And those are calls you can make at leisure, well before you get to the hospital, well before you choose a hospital, and just listen to the kind of answers you get. Are they being straight with you? Are they being honest? Are they being modest about what they know and what they don't know? If the answer is just, hey, we're really good at this, we take good care of people, and you say, well, can you explain to me, can you document that to me in any way? Well, you trust us, we're really good. At that point, you say, well, why won't they tell me? Whereas somebody else you call and you say, what are you doing in this? Oh, we have an extensive program on this. If you'd like our clinical outcome data, I'm happy to show it to you. You have much more confidence. Now, the interesting thing about that is it's often the hospitals that have the better reputation that are least likely to be transparent about their outcomes. They're relying on an old reputation based on relationships among doctors or whatever it is. And they sometimes don't want to publish their numbers because their numbers indicate that they're not any better, really, than the place down the street. So spend some time, do some research on the Internet. This is not a matter that requires great expertise on your part.
So we're talking about infections and cross-contamination. Folks always talk about fabric as a vector for cross-contamination. Should we be worried about lab coats and privacy curtains and those type of things?
Well, yes. In fact, some doctors don't wear long ties. They wear bow ties for that reason, so that the tie doesn't drag across the patient. And if you're looking at the privacy curtains and things like that, or even the handrails on the bed, you can't see germs. You don't know what's there. You probably won't even be in the room necessarily when the housekeeper comes through and does the cleaning. It's an important part of what goes on, but I'm not sure as a patient you can do much on that front. I would say the most significant thing to be concerned with is the hand washing for your caregivers caregivers, but also for the people who come visit you, because they can bring germs in and they can also spread your germs in the world. And then keeping clean the things right around you, like the handrails of the bed, the tray. You know, how often have you been in the hospital? Unfortunately, I've seen this a lot where someone has taken a bandage off or whatever and put it on the tray next to the bed, then thrown it away, and then the next thing is the food service people come in and put the food on the tray, and the housekeeper hasn't been there in the meantime. So you want to be alert to that, and if you have someone with you in the room, they can always ask for something to be cleaned, or they can do it themselves. There are usually wipes around, and there's always the cleansing solution that someone can put on a paper towel and wipe off your handrails and stuff like that. So I would take charge. You can never overdo it. You know, hospitals are germ-laden environments, and every person who comes in or leaves has the potential to carry those germs.
Right, right. I always tell folks during our presentations that, if you go to visit somebody, all you can do there is sit and look at the other person. I say pick up the hospital-grade bleach wipes, put on the gloves, and clean.
Yeah,
might as well do something.
The other thing is, here's just a simple thing. How often do you go to visit someone in a hospital room, and maybe you clean your hands before you get in, and then while you're sitting there, you notice your shoes are untied. Mm-hmm. So you go down and tie your shoes. Well, let's think about where those shoes have been walking and what kind of stuff is on them. So if you're a visitor, after you do something like that, or after you pick up something, go wash your hands again. Be a little obsessive-compulsive.
Got it.
It isn't often that I say to people, be OCD. But when you're in a hospital room, there's no harm with being too clean. This is not the place where you want to build up antibodies to make your body stronger. Your body's in a weakened condition, and you want to avoid germs. You'll have plenty of chance to absorb germs once you leave.
Well, we are going to move to a little happier topic, and since it's Father's Day show, we are considering Paul as the father of using social media, that would be blogging, to improve healthcare in real time to encourage transparency. So let's move to a happy topic. Tell us about your book, Goal Play Leadership Lessons from the Soccer Field.
Okay, although I consider my fatherhood of my two daughters is much more important than the blogging or the book. But one of those daughters was involved in playing soccer as a little girl, and I was her coach and coached her for many years. And then when she graduated, I kept coaching. And I really enjoy the time with the kids, and I love to see them develop individually and as a team and watch them grow and enjoy the game and all those things that are wonderful parts of sports. And being a coach in that environment is a very special relationship. And one of the things I noticed over the years of coaching and also running organizations, most recently the hospital, is that what seemed to work in terms of coaching these 11-year-old girls in a soccer team also seemed to work in running a large organization. That when you're in a managerial or a leadership position in an organization, not just the CEO, but anywhere in an organization, your job is really of a coach. It's to try to build a team, to help people learn, to give positive reinforcement, and the like. And so after I left the hospital, I finally sat down and wrote the book about this, and it's called Goal Play, Leadership Lessons from the Soccer Field. And each chapter starts with an anecdote from my days coaching the little kids, and then I move into stories about healthcare and other businesses and try to draw out lessons that would be useful to people in leadership roles. I wrote the book because I always wanted to, and as you know, when you write a book, you're just putting yourself out there, and you wonder, is anyone going to read it? Mm-hmm. Does anyone care about what I've said? And I've been really heartened by the response to the book. People really enjoy it. Many people tell me they've read it through twice. They read it once, and then they read it through again and take notes and mark it up and so on. So I feel really good that it's gotten that response.
Well, how can our listeners find the book? Where can they get a hold of it?
Well, you can find it on Amazon, and so it's available in paper version. It's also available in Kindle version on Amazon. And then there's a wonderful site called Smashwords, smashwords.com, where you can also upload any other ebook format that you might have for your iPad, your Nook, your Sony thing, whatever. You have no excuse not to buy the book at this point. And I hope people like it. And if they do, I would ask them to write a review on Amazon. And if they don't like the book, just forget I asked.
Do not write a review. And where can folks find your blog? What is it called again?
It's called Not Running a Hospital, and the easiest way is just put Paul Levy's blog, do a Google search, Paul Levy's blog, and it's the first thing that will pop up.
And you are there.
Besides the blog itself, I'm on Twitter as Paul F. Levy. I'm on Facebook, and if people want to, and LinkedIn, of course, and you can follow the blog in any of those ways. Once you get to the blog, you can actually subscribe to it and have it delivered to you at 7 o'clock every morning Eastern Time with a brand new story.
It's a great blog. You can spend days and days delving through all of those articles, which I've spent quite a bit of time on.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
You say so.
Do you have any final words of advice for our listeners today?
Pat, what you've said so often in your materials, which in your book and in your interviews and your website, which is when you're going in for medical treatment, it's a difficult time. It's a stressful time. And it's a very difficult thing to advocate for yourself when you're in that situation. You may not feel good. You may be on some drugs, some narcotics, whatever it is. So whenever possible, have someone go with you who knows you well, who can represent you well, and will not be intimidated by the setting they're in. And they can do this in a respectful, kind way with the providers. Remember that those nurses and doctors are working hard and they're tired and stressed out too. But if you or that other person engage in good, respectful conversations with your providers, there's a much better likelihood that the experience will be better for you and a higher likelihood that you won't be harmed by the experience.
Paul, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. I hope that you come back again and again, and happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure being with you.
Right now, I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes with the legendary game show host Chuck Woolery, the spokesperson for Generation America. Chuck, tell us about Generation America and your involvement.
I really don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just a citizen with a point of view. It happens to have a little celebrity. I had always heard of AARP all my life. I mean, we all have. We've been pretty much stalked by them since we're 50. So I just figured that was the only thing out there. And quite frankly, I didn't know that much about AARP. I really didn't. And then I started surveying what they were doing and what they were up to and what their voice was, and I really assumed that this was like a war, and I had to get involved, and so I did. And now I'm the spokesman for Generation America, but there really needed to be an alternative, and when I started to do a little research on especially AARP, I thought, my gosh, do people know about this? It was stunning, some of the stuff that they pull and some of the stuff that they do. It's a really political organization. Now, there's politics and everything, but I started to listen to some of the things they were saying. All of a sudden, I realized that they were telling us one thing and they were really doing another, and certainly didn't suit me as far as my welfare was concerned as a senior. And it was remarkable what I didn't know and the things that were going on that I wasn't aware of that were not in my best interest as being a senior from a group of people who were advocating for me, supposedly. So I joined Generation America. That's what I did. First I joined, and then I became a spokesman for them, and I think that they're doing the right thing. If you're a senior and you're conservative on any level, even if you're not a conservative, they work for your benefit. So here I am.
And we are happy that you are here and look forward to your return next week.
All right, thank you.
To learn more and to join Generation America, visit generationamerica.org. You're listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio. Now you can join us every Saturday morning on two Cleveland, Ohio stations from 7 to 8 Eastern on AM 1420 WHK and from 9 to 10 Eastern on AM 1220 WHKW and on two Phoenix, Arizona stations on Saturday morning from 6 to 7 Mountain Time on AM 1360 KPXQ and on Sundays in Phoenix from 9 to 10 Mountain Time on AM 960 KKNT. Or you can always listen to us live online from anywhere in the world at the station's websites. I am your hostess, Pat Rouleau. So happy to spend this hour with you to help you survive any healthcare or hospital encounter. Well, today we're going to play a little Father's Day game called Father Knows Best. Each of us will share a piece of fatherly advice that we've heard, and then we will translate it into a healthcare situation. guys remember that show?
Oh, yeah, that's been a long time ago.
No.
Joe is too little
Too young
to remember. All right, are we ready to play, you guys?
Let's go for it.
Okay, all right, I'll start. The best advice my dad ever gave me was to always tell the truth. He said people will always react more positively if you bring your mistake to their attention versus them finding it out on their own. How do we relate that to a healthcare situation?
That's a good question.
Okay, the crickets are going off. Well, actually, it kind of reminds me of our interview last week. We had Dr. Sands and Dr. Woodworth from Massachusetts Alliance for Communication and Resolution following a medical injury when we talked about hospital disclosure and apology. I know I would have appreciated if the hospital came to me and my mom and communicated what happened. I think that's all that people really want. So it helps to tell the truth right up front, yeah?
It does, yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, you guys. All right, Joe, do you have any fatherly words of advice that you've heard?
Don't do that or you go blind. No, I'm just kidding. Actions speak louder than words.
That was good, Joe.
I'm at a loss for words. I didn't expect that. Okay, what's the real one he said?
Actions speak louder than words.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's kind of like what I talked about during today's Healthcare Hazard of the Week. You know, you've got fancy terminology and research studies and evaluations, but nothing will ever take the place of a single person's actions. That's what they mean, I think, by a little less talk and a lot more action. You guys know that song?
I remember it vaguely.
It's a country song. Anyway, here's a comment from the famous Father Knows Best, Robert Young.
We need a little more action around here. Active participation is the basis of good citizenship. Don't you kids realize that the habits you form here at home are the ones you're going to take with you into your community life? A good citizen doesn't shirk his duty. He does his share to help others. And what's more, he doesn't have to be asked 100 times. He volunteers willingly and cheerfully. Is that clear?
You got it.
Well, here's another one from my dad. When a guy takes you out to dinner, he used to say, watch how he treats a waitress or a waiter. Take a cue from that.
That's pretty good advice there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. I think so. I think that you could tell a lot about a person when they don't think you're paying attention, right? I remember when I was in the hospital one day that a doctor whom I thought I respected really was harsh and condescending to the nurse in the room, and that kind of changed the way I looked at him, huh?
Gives you a different perspective.
It does. It does.
My dad used to say, don't take any wooden nickels.
Oh. Did you ever hear that one, Joe?
Yeah, actually.
Did you ever take any wooden nickels?
Unfortunately.
I think that's just a lighthearted reminder to be cautious in all dealings. Again, with healthcare, I think it comes back to being aware and informed. You know, if somebody tells you something and you just don't take it at face value, yeah?
I agree with you 100% on that.
All right. No wooden nickels. Do you have any more, guys? Which one of you?
Yeah, I got one more.
Oh, okay.
At an office party, always keep your ears open and your mouth shut.
Well, I think that means that you can always learn more if you talk less. Probably pays to listen, yeah?
Bring someone with you to listen.
Joe, you got it. That is the answer.
I like that, Joe.
All right, Joe's been paying attention. Bobby, you have any more?
Yeah, my dad used to tell me, he says, always check your rear view mirror.
That's actually a good piece of advice. Always check your rear view mirror, because in life, I think it doesn't just pertain to driving. It's about being aware and informed of things that might sneak up from behind and hit you. Again, in a hospital situation or healthcare, I guess awareness is the key, right?
You've got to be aware of everything going on.
In front of you and behind you.
Remember, look both ways.
That's a good one. Look both ways before you cross the street. I have one my dad used to tell me, because he bucked authority. He said, if you need to go to the bathroom and the teacher won't let you, get up and leave anyway.
Oh, okay. I thought it was good.
You thought it was going to be worse than that?
Yeah, just go.
Oh, go in your seat?
Yeah.
No. No, he said you could leave. What do you guys think that means in a healthcare situation?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
I guess it means that authority figures do not necessarily deserve blind obedience, huh?
You got to be aware all the time.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So just because a scary person with perceived authority tells you to do something doesn't mean you necessarily have to do it. Here's my final one that my dad always instilled. In fact, I have it framed in his handwriting on my desk, and it says, you can do it if you believe. See the picture.
And I've read it every time I walk into your office because it's right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's important to feed yourself positive thoughts and believe in possibilities. Actually, my dad was a living example of that. He only had an 8th grade education, but went on to be one of the most successful persons at New York Life. And we even had that engraved on his headstone. It says, all things are possible to him who believes. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't think we can do anything better than that piece of advice. So I thank you guys for playing Father Knows Best. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Bobby.
You're quite welcome.
Our games are always a fun and a fast way to share serious information. Well, listeners, don't go anywhere. There's so much more you can learn about healthcare and hospital safety on America's favorite radio show, Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio. Once again, we have my friend Elizabeth Bailey with us, and she is ready to share some valuable patient safety checklists with us found in her book, The Patient's Checklist. Listen as Elizabeth spends the next 2 minutes with us to share some of her easy-to-use checklist tips and tools. Elizabeth, tell us today, what are some things a patient should bring for a hospital stay?
Hospitals are very, very noisy places, and sleep is essential for healing. So I suggest patients bring earplugs and a sleep mask. Hospitals are also often very cold. Bring some extra socks so your feet don't get cold. Circulation is a really important part of the healing process as well. One of the most important things I think people can bring is an economy-size hand sanitizer, and that should be placed on the bedside table because patients should be washing their hands as much as your family and healthcare personnel who are dealing with you. Patients touch bed rails, they touch doorknobs, they touch a wheelchair if they're being transferred here and there. It's easy to forget that they should be washing their hands just as much as anyone else. And I also think having a hand sanitizer on the table right next to the patient is a reminder for everyone that hand hygiene is crucial. And finally, I would suggest bringing a family photo that reminds you of life outside the hospital and reminds you that you are a person first and a patient second.
Oh, that's great advice. I love the hand sanitizer idea, to bring a giant one, place it on the table. They can't miss it. The photo idea is an excellent idea as well. Tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and where they can purchase your book.
My book is on Amazon, but you can find out more about my book and me by going to my website, thepatientschecklist.com.
Well, Elizabeth, I thank you for sharing your wisdom and advice with us today. You and I have had similar paths, and I am happy that those paths have crossed. And you're a welcome addition to our show, and I look forward to more of your tips next week.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio every Saturday morning in Cleveland, Ohio, and every Saturday morning and Sunday morning in Phoenix, Arizona. I am Pat Rouleau, your hostess and author of the book, Speak Up and Stay Alive, The Patient Advocate Hospital Survival Guide, and that is available at all of our live speaking events or at our website, speakupandstayalive.com. That's where you can also locate radio show times, dates, and station information. That's speakupandstayalive.com. Well, today we talked about the importance of people as the defining factor in making or breaking the patient experience. Whether you are a patient, doctor, nurse, or family member, it behooves all of us to become as informed as we can and to strive to create and maintain an environment where everyone feels free and safe to speak up. And our guest, Paul Levy, shared his vast knowledge and experience when it comes to hospital-acquired infections and transparency in healthcare. And we played a special game, Father Knows Best, a lighthearted way to look at Dad's advice as it pertains to healthcare safety. Now, if you missed some of today's show, you are certainly living on the edge. In fact, when you join us each week, you may be adding years to your life or to the life of someone you know and love. So, set your alarm clocks for Saturday and Sunday mornings and tune in. Tell your friends, don't be a radio hog. And if you want to hear the show again, or if you want to play it for a friend in need, simply go to the radio link at the new and improved speakupandstayalive.com website to listen to today's program. Start your week with an O, Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio. And let me take a quick moment to thank all of our radio sponsors and weekly guest experts, because thanks to them, we are here, and that helps keep you safe. We've got Schraff & King, attorneys for all of your advanced planning needs in Willoughby Hills, Ohio. Darrell Hicks, consultant and author of the book, Infection Prevention for Dummies. Generation America, on the right side for seniors. Elizabeth Bailey, author of The Patient Checklist. and Junction Auto Family in beautiful Chardon, Ohio. Mountain View Funeral Home and Cemetery in Mesa and Queen Creek. We have Power Tags, Titles, and more in Queen Creek. Hari Khalsa, your champion for healthcare advocacy solutions. And Casey Quinlan, Mighty Casey Media, and author of Cancer for Christmas, as well as the Coyote Coupon Books. I encourage everyone listening to support these fine folks. And be sure to listen next week as we continue to inform and entertain, all the while keeping you safe during any healthcare or hospital encounter. And of course, these boys will be here to play whatever game they decide. Always a fun way to share important healthcare and hospital safety and survival tips and tools with you. So when is that? You know when it is. It's next Saturday morning, where you can find us in Cleveland, Ohio from 7 to 8 Eastern on AM 1420 WHK, or from 9 to 10 Eastern on AM 1220 WHKW. And in Phoenix, Arizona on Saturday mornings from 6 to 7 Mountain Time on AM 1360 KPXQ, and again on Sunday morning from 9 to 10 Mountain Time on AM 960 KKNT. Or remember, you can always listen live via the internet. Check the SpeakUpAndStayAlive.com website to find out how. In the meantime, I hope you have a healthy and a happy week. I am Pat Rouleau, and I am your guide to safe and successful healthcare and hospital encounters.
The information provided in today's broadcast is for informational purposes only and was not intended for use as diagnosis or treatment of a health problem and should not be considered as medical advice. If you've missed part of today's show or just want to share the information with friends, you can listen to all of Pat's previous shows at SpeakUpAndStayAlive.com. Want even more information? Purchase a copy of Pat's book at SpeakUpAndStayAlive.com. Once again, it's SpeakUpAndStayAlive.com. Have questions or comments? Become a friend on Facebook. We're called Speak Up and Stay Alive. Or you can call Pat at 440-725-5462. Until next week, remember, it's okay to ask others to wash their hands. You have to speak up and stay alive.
Survive.